Welcome to the Aerospace Executive Podcast, featuring in-depth conversations with executives, leaders, influencers, and journalists in this dynamic, high-stakes industry. Hosted by Craig Picken, founder of North Star Group, the boutique executive search firm for the aerospace industry. You'll learn how top aerospace executives are developing their people, competing for talent, overcoming challenges, and adjusting to industry trends to drive growth and profits. And now, let's join your host, Craig Picken.
Welcome to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. I'm Craig Picken. Hey, today we've got Dave Scheu with us. Dave is an accomplished Navy pilot, Naval Academy graduate, and outstanding business leader who I've known for the better part of a decade. He also currently runs the flight department for a highly respected Fortune 500 media company based up in New York. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Craig. Thanks for having me.
So you were just so you've got two big jets up there, and I know you guys just went through a big acquisition process. How important are your airplanes to the overall business?
The airplanes are critical. The acquisition process was a top consideration for the C-suite and making sure that we're managing the life cycle of the assets. 40% international flying, these guys need to go where they need to go when they need to get there. And when our dispatchers are managing the air transport plan, we benchmark, hey, what would this trip require to do it commercial or to charter these legs? Or, we benchmark all of that and then take it to the boss or, the principal executive on the trip and let them know what's going on and how this benefits them. So that's a regular part of our drill.
So your boss is a pretty high profile guy. And, and he's had some pretty high profile executives, and obviously, flying two big cabin jets, it's a big capital investment. Let's put the cost aside. How much is the ancillary stuff important? Convenience, the security, just the flexibility of doing, what everybody needs to do to make commerce happen. Does that play really more into the decision about to have the jets than with the cost being a tertiary consideration?
Absolutely. When we consider the time available for these folks to get where they need to be, you just can't. It just doesn't. There's no other solution that's going to work. We've had times where we've got multiple executives going in different directions, and just based on the timing of the request and where our planes were, I've had to say, hey, I got to put you on first class because we don't have a good sense or a evaluation of the available charter to send you to point A to point B. So you're going to go on first class on this trip. And man, is it painful, not just because they don't like doing it, but sometimes it just doesn't work. So that's just the flat logistics part of it. The security is another matter. So we definitely have some folks that are in a niche where, a lot of people are watching them and where they go. And so to be able to not exactly conceal it, but control it more is definitely a significant consideration.
So you're more worried, not necessarily about the security of airlines and airports. You're more concerned about the security of who knows where we're going.
Sure.
Who we're seeing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. What do you think about to that being said, you guys blocking your tail numbers out there, and do you worry about flight aware very much, or no, not so much?
We do block our tail numbers, but if you know what you're doing, there's other resources out there, and you can certainly get to the data. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the companies that are absolutely most concerned about that, we're probably a 7. I know there's other companies and other departments, my peers that are keenly sensitive on that and trying to manage that part of the equation.
Yeah, I got you. What's your big? I mean, how many pilots do you? How many pilots do you have?
We have 8 pilots, 4 for each airplane. I'm the 9th pilot. I fly about a half of a schedule compared to the rest of the pilots. But
And you said about 40% of your business is international.
correct. Yeah, we fly a lot of Europe, a lot of Pacific Rim. Thankfully, we're not at the moment anyway. Anything could change, but we're not doing the Middle East. We're not doing Russia. We're not doing Africa. A little bit of South America, but that's the gist of it. And thankfully, most of the places we go are pretty well supported from an aviation standpoint.
So when you're taking on your flights, typical passenger load, 3 executives, 4 executives, full boat.
3, usually 3 would be the average. Sometimes it is, just the CEO or just the chairman. We have, it's a portfolio company, so there's lots of junior CEOs that do have access to the plane. So we try to manage that and maximum utility on the plane for all of the executive staff. So we do have trips where it's just one. And sometimes there's guests. So depending on, what the event is, what the meeting is, it could be a business team that is full boat. We probably do that twice a quarter on each airplane. And that can be, that has its own challenges with just the amount of food and the amount of people and the amount of luggage and, everything. It's a logistics challenge to be sure.
Yeah, I got you. So hey, so for everybody out there, so you and I have known each other a long time, and you're an aviation manager now, but what people don't realize is that you've got a really strong business background as well. You're a Naval Academy graduate with an MBA, so you understand how to run the numbers, and now that you see how important the jets are to your company. What do you think that these activist investors that are coming in, and I think about GE and some of the other companies that are coming in and targeting the jet, do you think that they're misguided and being short-sighted, or what's your opinion from more of a business standpoint?
I do think there's a lot of misplaced scrutiny. I shouldn't say scrutiny, but concern, right? Scrutiny is fine to make sure you're looking at the details and evaluating if the value proposition is there. But when that article hit the Wall Street Journal about GE sending a chase plane to follow around Jeff Immelt to make sure that he had an asset, and it cost the company an additional $250,000. My CFO called me and said, "Tell me we don't do this." And I said, "Of course we don't do that." But I did go back to him and I said, "Look, if the chairman is doing a around the world or a trans-Asia trip and sealing the deal on $3 or $4 billion worth of multi-year contracts, maybe that's worth it to make sure he gets there. $250,000 of operating costs on an asset you already own to make sure that he gets there with, absolute certainty. I certainly can't sit here where I am, and I don't think an activist investor can sit in their chair and 100% armchair quarterback that to say it was not a good business decision.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. And you think a guy like Jeff Immelt, an incredibly high profile CEO, or take some of your other high profile CEOs, Tim Cook over at Apple, or Microsoft, and Gates over at Microsoft, et cetera, and you say, okay, we're going to put them on a jet and we're going to send them to somewhere. If that jet breaks and it takes a couple of days to fix it, which is not an uncommon scenario, or and not an unreasonable scenario, you're not going to put them on Delta to fly them home.
Yeah.
So maybe there was some logic to the GE thing. I thought it was a very short-sighted decision as well. And now all of a sudden GE gives up their flight department, but now they're buying all sorts of charter and fractional, and the costs have not gone away. They've just been reallocated. But
right, and they're probably bigger.
Which is which is crazy. So yeah, I thought it was a very short-sighted decision as well. But everybody's crying. On another issue, everybody's crying about pilots. You've got Jet Aviation over there saying that a large cabin Gulfstream 650 pilot may command $300,000 in the not too distant future. Are you guys finding that finding really good pilots is becoming an exercise?
Thankfully, knock on wood, we have not had any turnover since I've been here. I've been here for 3 years, a little over 3 years. We have a great group of people, and we have a good team dynamic that helps, right? So for the most part, I think pilots feel like their value proposition is not being acknowledged at the higher levels of the company, and that's generally what causes somebody to leave their job, other than a huge pay disparity, right? So the airlines they're sucking up all the available pilots, and salaries are going up. We've all seen that. The biggest thing for me is to manage the overall situation of the job, because I can't compete with those salaries. There's no way. When I look at the data, I participate with a Fortune 50 company for a compensation survey that goes across about 70 flight departments that are all, say, Fortune 200-ish. And we compare notes, we benchmark duty times, hard days off, benefits, long-term comp, deferred comp. We take a look at all of that. And so since I got here and started doing that, in general, our company pays at about the 55th to 70th percentile range. And I've shared that with our C-suite and explained that, hey, you have us flying at the 90th percentile as far as how much we fly, where we fly, and the caliber of service that is required. So that's a mismatch. That doesn't mean I've been successful in getting, a sweeping pay increase for the whole department. But I have been successful in getting some smaller things that do actually make a difference and don't cost the company quite as much money. So starting this year, for all of our flight crew, if you're on a commercial itinerary to pre-position or come home or whatever you're doing, if the flight time on your itinerary is more than 5 hours, you fly business class. Doesn't matter if it's domestic or international, you're flying business class for those trips. And for our crews that are doing 12 to 15 legs, whether it's company or commercial, a month, that's a big deal. That makes a big difference to be able to sit in the front of the plane and try to get some rest or be more comfortable instead of being jammed in with your kneecaps up against the seat in front of you.
Yeah, no doubt. What are you on the recruiting side of the house? What are you looking for? When you're out, I know you don't have a huge turnover in your department, but if you are out recruiting a pilot, what are the biggest traits that you and your bosses want to see?
Yeah, good question. We have a solid group of people right now that really come to the job with a passion for what they do, a passion for supporting the people that they're with. So great team ethic, no job too small, always willing to help out, your teammate when it's required. A lot of expertise, seasoned professionals. Everybody that we have is a seasoned international captain. We don't have co-pilots. And I have kind of reflects my background. Everybody has a ground job like we did in the Navy. So none of the pilots here just fly and then turn in the keys and go home. Everybody's got a ground job of some sort, some program that they're the administrator of. And that includes interfacing with vendor relationships for different parts of the department, helping me with the budgeting. Hey, what should I expect for X or Y? And that dovetails into them being happy, because it's not just me setting the terms and the situation of the department. They know that, well, if something's messed up, it's probably their fault too, right? So I need people that can do that and that can swing in that kind of an environment, not the person that's just going to fly and go home.
Do you find those skill sets are easy to find, harder to find?
Well, thankfully, with military connections, I do lean heavily on that network and keep tabs on a handful of folks that I know are getting ready to retire or might be ready to move on from flying military hardware to the civilian workforce. And you just got to find the right person that is a lifelong learner, sort of that intellectual curiosity, and tap into that. The other thing that's really important, at least for me as a department manager, is making sure that they have a plan, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and they're on track to go somewhere. Whether it's stay here, likely not, but I articulate to them, hey, I want to help you do that, and I can do that credibly. I saw a lot of that in the military. You probably did too, where you have your commanding officer says, hey, you're going to go do X or Y, for your next tour. And you say, well, I don't really want to do that. That doesn't really fit with my plan. Well, tough cookies, go do it. And, there's a lot of animosity, I think, in some places when the boss says to you, go do it, and you say no, well, you just burned that bridge, So it's better for me. You get more bees with honey, right? So if I can tell my dispatcher, hey, if you want to go to a bigger department to be a dispatcher for 6 planes, I will help you do that. And I think that's my responsibility, helping our people grow, and they hear that and they believe that. So I get more work out of them by doing that.
You feel like, look, you can go to American Airlines, you can go be a pilot at American Airlines and, fly right seat in the 737, eventually fly left seat, move up from there. What's more interesting to the pilots that you've talked to? Is it, longevity, pay, equipment, technology, being involved in in an operation, being able to take ownership in an operation? What's motivating pilots now and to, making them step up to be more of a leader versus a, driver?
I think that's might be a nature versus nurture. That's the hardest thing for me to be able to find when I talk to somebody that might be a prospective hire in, say, 2 or 3 years. I mean, I have one of our pilots is going to retire next year, so I'm getting ready to manage that. But I want to find the people that want to do some interesting stuff, that want to do other things other than fly. As as an aviator in the Navy, it's a collateral duty. It's not your primary duty. And, we have a really interesting book of business. You never know where the boss is going to say, we're going to fly next. I mean, since I've been here, we've flown into Burma. We've flown into Bhutan in the Himalayas, Vietnam. It's interesting. And I don't think you're going to get that in an airline.
Right.
But I definitely have to find the people that are have a very comprehensive view about what they do and what they like to do. And it's if somebody just wants to fly and turn in the keys at the end of the fly day, that's great. More power to them. That's an airline. That's an airline job. That's the person that should be placed in an airline job. And same thing. I'm more than happy to contribute to them getting there, but that's not the kind of person that I need to hire.
Yeah, no, I got you. And I got to think that your guys probably enjoy when they say, hey, we're going to Burma for the first time.
Yeah.
Somebody in your flight department takes ownership of that trip, or maybe it's the captain who's going to be flying. He takes ownership of that trip and does all the research and gets all the handling and overfly permits, et cetera, everything you need. And now he's got responsibility for it. Does that make them step up?
Yep, absolutely. They know that it's going to be their butt in the seat when they go fly in there. So they got to take care of the details leading up to that.
Yeah. So type ratings are expensive. Are you, when you're out recruiting, are you saying, hey, we want a rated pilot, or are you willing to send them to school if you find the right person?
Yeah, I don't care about that. I'll send them to school. And, knock on wood, what we've seen so far, at least here in this department, there are training contracts or there's employment language. Hey, you got to stay for a year. You're going to prorate the $75,000 that we just spent for your type rating. Most of the time, I think that stuff, I've been told, it doesn't really hold up in court if somebody really wants to, put the iron in the fire or feet to the coals on that one. For us, it's really just a handshake. Hey, I'm going to spend $75,000 on you. I'm going to pay you a little bit less. I'm not going to pay you $75,000 less because that math just doesn't work out. But, I'll guarantee you a pay raise when you finish your first year, which is not unlike the probationary period that you have in an airline.
Mm-hmm.
You got to get through that first year after your IOE before they say, okay, good, we'll give you the full pop paycheck now. So we do a little bit of that, but it's really just, let's shake hands. You look me in the eye and tell me you're committed to being here, at least for that year. And so far, that seems to work out.
For a guy to get hired in your flight department, what's the minimums?
We really don't have any minimums. So we have one junior captain who's only got 2,800 hours. Very sharp young guy, hot on the technology. He is our electronic flight bag and Apple, iPad, everything guru, and knows how to interface with all of that stuff and make it work in the plane. We hired him. That was 3 years ago, and he was only at, I think, about 1,900 hours when we hired him. We did hire him as an SIC, as a co-pilot.
Uh-huh.
But it really depends on the whole package. So I would say no minimums. On average, though, our guys are all pretty seasoned. I might be one of the lower end at about 5,700 hours for me. But we'll have a conversation with anybody out there.
So the junior pilot, I'm laughing because we've been having the millennial conversations
Sure.
elsewhere. And so you hire a millennial pilot who's really strong on the tech side. Other than the tech, what did he bring to the table that attracted you?
So I'll be upfront. I didn't hire him. My previous director hired him.
Okay.
But I can't say I would have made a different decision. We actually hired him from our training provider, and he was teaching on the platform, and he was a really good instructor. Had a really great cockpit demeanor, good personal skills, great crew coordination to be able to articulate a position about a particular malfunction that might be a little bit debatable until you sort out the exact foundational details and what your next course of action is going to be. So all those characteristics had some weight to it in deciding to hire him. I've heard the millennial arguments too. We do talk about that as far as, okay, they've got all this great technology, they follow the magenta line, but do they necessarily have the SIC skills and the composure there for the deep foundational skills of flying? And to that end, we have a pretty robust sort of extracurricular training program where we do upset recovery training every year. I have money in the budget for all of our pilots to go spend 5 to 10 hours every year in a tailwheel plane and just go do some good, solid stick and rudder flying. And that keeps everybody, I think, on top of the manual skills versus the automation.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because the one thing that just scares the hell out of me is I look at the Asiana guys into San Francisco, and you find out there's 40,000 hours of collective flight time up in the cockpit, and not one of them knows how to do an uncoupled approach into a 10,000-foot runway on a clear day.
Right.
Does that scare you? I mean, when you think about the caliber of pilot, or are they pilots, or are they just systems managers out there?
Yeah, it's definitely a dilemma. It's an incredible debate right now because, with my background in the Navy, it's a lot of manual flying. So when I got in this plane, which is, the Bombardier Global is a premier state-of-the-art, near state-of-the-art now with the G650 and the coming of the Global 7000. But, our planes have the Rockwell Collins Vision flight deck, two, across the board, you've got three and then one. So four huge TV screens, looking at you, computers with a mouse that goes across them, and you're just clicking with the mouse. And that's how you need to fly the plane, to use all the automation, all the tools that are there to help you in the most difficult of times, whether it's the weather or some part of the aircraft is not operating as advertised. You need to know how that automation works. And in order to do that, for it to be second nature, you got to use the automation all the time. But the flip side of that is your hand flying skills do deteriorate. They are perishable. And so you may not necessarily be as prepared as you could be for a situation when the automation doesn't work as advertised. And
so when you're flying across the Atlantic or the Pacific, are you guys playing a lot of, going back to our Navy days, are you doing the same thing we used to do? Hey, what if, a lot of what if scenarios and keeping each other sharp?
Yep. Yeah. That's when I'm on a flight, that's what I do. I can't say that every crew does that, but I think in general, most of our pilots are, hey, let's use this time to do something that's, really productive. But when I have a day where I'm doing 3 legs and the weather's bad and we're on automation most of the time, and then the next day is a beautiful day and I say, okay, I'm going to hand fly a lot of this, even just in a few days of, one day is mostly automation, the next day is hand flying, you feel it.
Yeah.
And that's in a department where I advocate, hey, go fly a glider. We have resources. I budget it. Like, go spend $2,000 to go to Mammoth Lakes, California, and fly a glider for 3 days and learn something new.
Right. That's pretty interesting. That's pretty interesting. You do that, and pretty forward thinking. Are other flight departments doing that as well, or do you feeling like you're kind of unique?
There are other departments that do it. I've benchmarked with a handful of other of my peers to say, how do you sell that to the CFO? And the way that works is I just describe, tell the story of Air France, tell the story of Air Asiana, tell the story of, other mishaps, Colgan Air, and go, hey, I don't want this to happen because our guys are not prepared. And I'm talking about spending $2,000 a pilot.
Yeah.
That's just like, it's
chump change in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. So when you put it that way, it tends to, all right. They kind of, home run, we'll let you do it. And let's not talk about this anymore.
I hear you. Hey, let's switch gears a little bit. So your company is very technology, it's a leader in the tech space. And everybody, it's pretty well known. It's a leader in the tech space. What's the customer dynamic on the airplane? You've got a bunch of tech smart passengers on there. What are their expectations?
Good question. I think a lot of it has to do with the generations. So we do have a very diverse C-suite age-wise. And certainly the young up and coming techs, say, that are under the age of 40, their expectation is primarily connectivity. The more senior folks, it starts to be less about connectivity and more about other creature comforts, I guess. But they're learning the importance of the connectivity too, and it's not just the phone. So the connectivity becomes the go, no go item on the airplane. That is, hey, does this work? No, the satellite antenna is not operating as advertised, and so we can't get you the internet. They will think twice about whether we should move to another asset or patrol or postpone the trip. And we've made significant capital investments on the SATCOM side to try to give them the fastest possible speeds airborne. And so that's been a very interesting deep dive into satellite technology, VPNs, bandwidth, speed, all of that. I know more about that now than I ever cared to know. But
I hear you. I was talking to some guys at Cobham not too long ago, and the technology is moving. It's moving fast, and it's almost a shame you find out, hey, I just spent all this money on a piece of equipment only to find it's obsolete in a year.
Yeah, and it's like a $700,000 install that could become obsolete in 3 years. So you're almost changing that stuff out at the same pace as you're changing out the leather and the carpet.
How do you amortize that? Hey, do your pilot, now do your flight crews interact? How do your flight crews and your passengers interact, or do they? Is there like hey, nice to see you, come on board, and we're out of your way?
That's a little passenger dependent. We definitely have a formal protocol. We do not, to get down into the details, we do not wear airline uniforms with epaulets and captain stripes and all that. We just wear a dark conservative business suit. But we do stand at the steps and say, "Welcome aboard. I'm Captain so and so, and let us know what you need." But some of the passengers that are routine flyers, they may sort of break the barrier a little bit, and that's just their personal style. One of our previous principals, who's gone off to another very high-profile technology company, he was the master of being able to fly a trip with any of our 8 pilots, and how's your wife Bridget, and how are the kids today, and that kind of thing. So it's very different depending on the passengers, but definitely, I think in general, we feel like we're appreciated. That's for sure.
There you go. So on the technology side, you and I were talking about Satcom Direct. I know you're on their customer advisory board. What is the technology that everybody wants and needs to have in their airplane?
Yeah, right now it's really about the satellite communications, and you hear about that from the airlines, that we've all had experience with the connectivity on airline flights, which originated with, GoGo in-flight, which is an air-to-ground system. But now with the percentage of international operations, GoGo is only available domestically. You got to have an air-to-air solution. So we're looking at that. We have what's called KA band, which is the fastest system available right now for the business aviation arena. But there's limitations there too, that you have to set the expectation with the executives. Hey, you're not going to be able to surf like you do at home, because we're only going to get about 10 megabytes a second. You're not going to get 60 or 100 like you do at home with a landline. And there's airplane limitations, depending on where the satellite is. And, if we get a vector to get on course and that turns away from the satellite, and the satellite antenna can only go down so far, you're going to get a blip there. And, I've been flying and I get an email on my phone, because yes, my phone is connected to the Wi-Fi, and I get an email, "Why is the internet not working?" So get the plane on autopilot and email the boss who's in the back of the plane and say, we'll take a look at
it. So you got to email the boss who's in the back of the plane.
Yeah.
That's funny. I hear you. What else? What else is so Satcom is the big thing, and what else in the cabin as far as like cabin management, entertainment systems, etc.? Is there anything that's the big in demand?
Sure. Yeah, with our 2 planes, we've got 2 different generations of cabin management systems. They're both made by Rockwell Collins, but the newer one is a fiber optic system with a specific architecture that allows all of the screens and all of your audio-visual sources to talk to each other individually, and you can put any source can go to any screen, whether it's in the back or in the front or in the galley. we've got Apple TV on there. We've got a Sling box, so you can stream whatever you want to stream. You can do a business meeting. Somebody can be in the back stateroom if they need to be sleeping and kind of having some quiet time, and you can still have a business meeting up front. That is the state-of-the-art technology, and not all the planes have that. That's actually called the Venue System by Rockwell Collins. That's the $700,000 install. If you don't have it, most of the airplanes coming out of Gulfstream and Bombardier right now have that. That's the industry standard now. But with all the used inventory that's out there, that's something that people are strongly considering if they're going to say, all right, we're going to keep this used airplane for another 5 years. It's going to allow you to do the things that are expected of by your customers, and it's also going to affect your terminal value when ultimately you decide to sell it. So,
gotcha. So you're flying across the Pacific at what speed? 87, 90?
Not in the global. The global cruise is typically 8.5. We can do up to 8.8, but that's fuel dependent, as you know. So usually it's 8.5 for us. But we can fly at 8.5 and then still do 12 hours, 11 hours. That gets you pretty far.
Does the supersonic business jet, if you're doing Mach 8.5, Gulfstream 500, 600, going to be doing 9.0? Does the SSBJ start to make sense, or do you think it's just another $30 million?
That's debatable. I think that is highly customer dependent. So, our number one executive that we fly around, I don't think that's attractive to him because he's about the creature comforts and the space, and he wants to be able to have his guests or his business team up front, and then he's going to retire to the stateroom in the back and do his own thing. So the supersonic business jet, that's a much tighter cabin, is not going to be interesting to him. I think some of the younger generation of executives, it will be interesting because they want to, get where they're going, do what they got to do, and then move on to the next place, whether that's home or not. We have very different customers across our portfolio of companies, and the main business group from one of the companies is 4 guys. They want to get on the plane with pizza and beer and do their business planning all the way to Europe or to Southeast Asia. They hop out. They have 36 hours on the ground to handle all the business meetings and business entertainment and networking and camaraderie, et cetera. And then they get back on the plane and they just want to sleep and get home as soon as they can. So for them, the supersonic business jet might be appealing. Other folks, I think it's just as much about the journey. So if it's just as much about the journey getting there, then the larger cabin is going to be the solution. Gotcha.
So Dave, you're getting approached by everybody. You obviously fly 2 Bombardiers. You've been working with the Gulfstream. I'm sure you've sat with the Gulfstream guys and the Cessna guys and all the other providers out there. Who's doing a great job in the industry? I mean, who do you think is really, Bombardier and Gulfstream aside, Satcom Direct, we talked about those guys a little bit. Who out there is really impressing you?
Well, Satcom Direct would be my favorite. They're on the top of the list. Jet Support, JSSI, those guys do a great job in handling what they need to handle for the engine programs. There's a handful of consultants out there. Airlex, Amanda Applegate, is a phenomenal attorney. I think from a vendor standpoint, the most important thing is to be reliable, to use vernacular from flying that you and I are familiar with. Brief what you're going to fly and fly what you briefed. If you can do that as a vendor, we're going to stand by you. It's when things get off of that path, whether cost is constantly changing, schedule is constantly changing. Those are the 2 biggest things, right? If you can come to me and say, here's what it's going to cost, here's the performance we're going to give you, and we're going to deliver it on this date. If you can stick to that, or certainly give as much advance notice of changes, that's a good vendor. Right. But it's when you can't articulate and stick to those things and be reliable that things start to be a problem. And there's companies have different perspectives on where they're going to put their emphasis. So there are companies out there that they make a great product, and this is whether it's a vendor or a subcomponent maker or actual aircraft maker. Hey, this is an awesome product, take it or leave it, and you can deal with it with whatever happens. And we might throw you some customer support, we might not. And then there's other companies that, and Satcom Direct is one of them. They put up amazing customer support 24/7. Somebody's on the phone. Somebody will email you back reliably with the data or the solution or the information that you need. And with a group like that behind it, even if their product was maybe slightly less in performance than a competitor, we would be more inclined to go with a vendor like that, because I look at it as a business relationship. When we make decisions, it's not, well, okay, this product and this product's going to be in the plane for 5 years. I look at it as, do I want to be a business partner for 5 to 10 years with this company? Sometimes you don't have a choice.
That's a good point. You look at it and say, look, you guys bought you just bought your Global. You put a new interior in it. You told me that process went pretty well.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. I want to be a business partner with this company for the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want them to to take care of me. Do they get that mentality?
Some do. For example, we had our refurb done at Standard Aero in Springfield, Illinois, and from the work that we did and some of the initial hurdles with the project management side, once we were on contract and executing, their team, I've got a background from Sikorsky and also from being on the Navy side of some contracts. Earned value management reporting is huge with all your DoD stuff, right? That is excruciating detail of cost, schedule, and performance.
Mm-hmm.
You can't expect a mom and pop vendor to do that, or even some of the OEMs don't even do that the experience that I have now in the last 5 years in the business world. But to sit with the folks at Standard Aero and say, look, the reporting needs to look like this. I gave them some examples of the data that I needed and the format, and they said, yes, sir. And they fixed it. And that is, their team is actually looking and improving to make that their standard deliverable. So if a company is going to go, approach the situation like that and be willing to learn, we're going to stand by it.
Yeah. So you want a partner, not a one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
And as the guys at Standard Aero once told me, hey, every time a DOM brings an airplane to our facility, a lot of times he feels his job is on the line. I think when you put it that way, it's like, hey, I got to go talk to my boss and explain to them why things went swimmingly well or not so well. It's hard when somebody puts you in that situation on the not so swimmingly well side of the house.
Correct.
So what are the great things that are happening in the industry? What's got you really optimistic?
I think the technology is always interesting. I'm not a techie or a tech head, but it is pretty amazing when you look at the Global 7000. What's going to happen when that airplane hits the market? The reach that it's going to have, and obviously the technologies that they put in place, whether it's the airframe, the avionics, or customer support, that all trickles down to the smaller airplanes eventually. So that's exciting. The world is getting ever smaller. It's not, that's perpetual. And the number of airplanes that are in the sky at any given moment and the technologies that have to be put in place to manage that is incredible. That's a technology piece that is a challenge with some of the more senior aviators. Trying to manage the constantly changing navigational requirements and equipment just to go across the Atlantic. It's eye-watering sometimes, but it's a necessary part of the process because you've got thousands of airplanes, going across the sky with 1,100 knots of closure right in the middle of the Atlantic, and if somebody's not in the right place, it's a disaster in the making, right? So,
yep.
The pace of technology for all that is really exciting.
What scares you?
Not being able to achieve what you need in that exact arena. I fly out of Teterboro most of the time, and that is the busiest private airport in the world. I think it shares that hat on and off with Van Nuys, California, north of LA. Yep. And man, the number of airplanes and your proximity to heavy jets coming in and out of Newark, it's probably once a month that somebody gets a flight violation coming out of Teterboro because they busted in altitude. And you got to have the technology, and you got to have really sharp professional crews that know exactly what they're doing with the technology. These airplanes have incredible engines. They take off like a rocket ship. You can blow through an altitude in half a second if you're not paying attention. So, making sure that our pilots are trained and know what they're doing and feel confident in operating in that environment. That's probably what keeps me up at night the most, is making sure that they feel confident in doing what they're doing.
You optimistic about the industry moving forward?
I think so. I think it's a good place to be. Again, you have to decide, or I would advise a young person to decide, what they're good at and what they like. Do they just want to fly? If they just want to fly, work towards being an airline pilot. If you want to do other things with your brain, it's just different strokes for different folks. Business aviation would be a great place to be if that's your mantra, if that's your personal outlook of, I like the flying a little bit, but there's this whole other world of other stuff out there to look into and be good at, then business aviation would be a good place for you.
Awesome. I love it. Hey, I appreciate you coming on today. I know you've been out of the office all week, and 45 minutes on a Thursday is a big commitment. So I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me.